attendees registered for this session. We're so happy that you're here. I'm joined today by Melissa Shaw, who will be providing ASL interpretation today. Thanks to my teammate John, who's managing technology behind the scenes. I want to share a few things before we get started today. We know many of you are familiar with Zoom meetings, but there are some differences in Zoom webinar, which we're using today. The biggest difference is you won't be able to see or hear yourself. This ensures all participants can focus on today's presentation. We want to draw your attention to a few different features in Zoom and how we'll use them today. First, to access the Zoom toolbar, move your mouse and the toolbar will appear and you can see the icons for chat and Q&A. Chat will be available for an exercise. This is a public record, however, and we will not be monitoring it. And chat between participants is not available during this session. There's a handout that we will be posting the link to in chat, so you can access it there as well. Feel free to pop questions into Q&A throughout the session. We will have some time at the end for questions. Obviously, we won't be able to get to all of your questions, but we hope to answer a few before the end of the session today. If you're having any technical issues, please use Q&A for that, and we'll do our best to help you. Next, you'll notice the icon for closed captioning. If you wish to see captioning, click on that icon and select View Full Transcript. You can adjust your view to make the presentation or speaker larger by sliding the vertical bar on your screen from left to right. Session materials are available on our website, and videos from today's session will be available within a week. If we get disconnected or run into tech troubles, we'll try to get the webinar up for about 5 minutes. In the event we can't, we'll record the session and put it up on our website. Finally, at the end of the session, a survey will appear. Please take the time to complete the survey. It provides both the presenter and Results Washington with some really great real-time feedback. Well, we are so fortunate to have Jared with us today. Jared Thatcher is a CPI program manager at the Port of Seattle. He's built a lean network with other US ports, hosts an annual virtual lean summit, coaches other lean professionals, and is an Amazon best-selling author with his book, Parenting the Lean Way. He holds a BA in Japanese from Portland State University and an international MBA from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and is a PMP and a certified Scrum Master. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you so much. So let me go ahead and pull up the presentation. Let me see, share screen. And share, here we go. And then I'm gonna minimize that and get rid of it. There we go. So Jessica, thank you so much for having me here and for that great introduction. And I want to thank you and the rest of the Results Washington team for the hard work you've done in putting on such a fantastic conference. I know we're all appreciative. I'm grateful to be here, and especially Melissa Shaw, thank you so much for signing for us. So I also want to give a shout out to all of us at the Port of Seattle, because we have a lot of really great people that have been going ahead and putting together a lot of continuous improvement. They've been really embracing lean and lean thinking in what they do, and they've come up with some fantastic improvements and innovation. And especially my team in the Office of Strategic Initiatives, both past and present. You've really made the last 2 years enjoyable as I've started my journey in working for government. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the, let's see here. Let's talk about the title. And I'm going to get rid of that so you don't see that. There we go. So Agile and Lean, it's about getting results. Well, I got to admit that was a little bit of a clickbait title. It really is about respect for people, which will lead to getting results. And if we focus just on performance, if we focus on just getting results, we're really missing the entire bar on both what Agile and Lean is all about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of this story here. Come back with me, if you will, to my early days in Little League, my first day of tryouts. And I show up and the coach says, "Where's your mitt?" And I said, "Well, I don't have one." He said, "That's okay, I've got some extras. Are you right-handed or left-handed?" I said, "Well, I'm right-handed." And so he hands me a glove and I proceed to put it on my right hand, only to discover it's a left-handed glove. And so I said, "Coach, I think you gave me the wrong glove." He said, no, you throw with your dominant hand, which is your right hand, and you catch with your non-dominant hand, your left hand. I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I was horrified. I was mortified. I was embarrassed. And I resolved then and there that I was going to teach my kids how to go ahead and play baseball, to catch and to hit and to throw the ball. And that's exactly what I did. And I thought I did a pretty good job until we show up to our first game. Some neighborhood families got together and we had a little softball game at the local park. And my boys were doing a great job catching the ball and throwing it. And then it was our turn to bat. And my son hits a great line drive and he starts running just as fast as his little legs will carry him to third base. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, you don't run to third base first. You actually run to first base, second, and then third. And I realized that as tools are essential to perform any task, but really knowing how to use them really does make all the difference. And in that sense, I failed my kids. Hopefully the next generation, they'll do a better job than I did. So today for the agenda, what I'm going to do is I'm going to not only give you a bunch of tools, in fact, 12 to be exact, but I'm going to show you how to apply those tools. And I'm going to show you in the Pdca cycle. So the plan, do, check, act. And what we're going to do is we're going to also introduce something called grasp the situation. And this is something that I like putting in the center of the Pdca cycle, because all along the way, we need to be really kind of looking at a high level, understanding what's going on in a holistic form. And so within that, we're going to talk about the voices of the customer. And then within plan, we're going to introduce sprints, time box, and user stories. When we get to do, we'll be talking about work in progress or WIP and Kanban boards. Check, we'll talk about a definition of done, burn down charts, and applying an EDI or equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. And finally, we're going to talk about daily stand-ups, the word of the day, and retrospectives. Now, there's a lot of tools here. I'm going to be going really fast through these, so it's not going to be a lot of explanation. What I'm hoping to do is to really get you excited about Agile and some of the tools that we have so that you can start applying those in your continuous improvement journey. So let's go ahead and get started. First, what is Agile? Well, Agile is really a mindset for improving teamwork and performance while adapting to customer changes. Essentially, it's an iterative project management methodology initially used in software development. And in 2001, 17 developers got together and they started looking at the state of how they were developing software. And they realized that it wasn't really working the way that they wanted it to, because they were focusing more on performance, right? It was the process and the tools. It was the comprehensive documentation about how software was supposed to work. Not that it always worked that way. It was about the contract negotiation with the client, and it was about following a plan and sticking to that plan. And what they realized is that really wasn't producing the results that they wanted to see in their software development. So they started focusing on respect for people. And so it was really individuals and interactions that were more important. Software, having working software, because that's what the customer values. It's customer collaboration, working with the customer, making sure they're getting what they want. And it's responding to change and being agile in adapting. And so all of these things on the left-hand side are about respect for people. And so this is called the Agile Manifesto. So it's the individuals and interactions over the process and tools, and the working software over the comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and being responsive to change over following a plan. Now, some people want to know, well, what, how is this used today? Well, just this year in 2021, the Project Management Institute has changed their PMP, or Project Management Professional Certification, to include Agile. So no longer is it the waterfall Gantt chart of you have to excavate before you can pour the foundation, before you can put up the subfloor, and then the walls, and then the roof. But it's having this Agile project management methodology. And about 50% of the questions now include Agile in the project management training. Now, some people wonder, is Scrum and Agile the same? And it's not really. What we're looking at here is a picture of a Scrum. So in rugby, this is a formation at the start of a play where both teams, they huddle together, they end up pushing against each other, trying to get control of the ball. And so really they're working together. And that's what Scrum is. And that's why they use it. It's this concept of working together. And so really Scrum is the the framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. That's the definition. In essence, what it is Scrum is the framework in which to apply the Agile thinking and values and principles. And there's a couple other methodologies out there too that apply Agile. So Agile is the thinking and Scrum is the doing. Now, we're all familiar, or we should all be familiar with the Pdca Cycle, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, sometimes known as Adjust. This is really the heart of continuous improvement, and it helps us in our efforts for improvement. And typically it's shown like this. And that's just because, honestly, it's really easy to create these type of graphs in Photoshop or in PowerPoint as well. So what I want you to do, though, is think of it like this. We're going to spend a lot more time in our plan phase than we do in any of the other phases, and I'll show you why in a minute. But in the center, we have GTS, or grasp the situation. Think of this as the reminder that we always need to be going to Gemba, or it's a Japanese word for going and seeing, going to where the action is, and understanding what is actually happening, having that high-level overview, knowing how everything fits together. And so we need to be doing that not just in the planning phase, but throughout the PDCA process and cycle. So let's talk about grasp the situation. And the tool here, one of my favorite, is voice of the customer. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of the different ways in which we use it, but in essence, voice of the customer is about creating value for the customer, because that's at the heart of both Lean and Agile. And it's also a tool that both Lean and Agile use. The tool is really about reaching out to the customers to understand what they see as value. And I could easily spend an entire day talking about how to run successful voice of the customer interviews and how to apply that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one way to actually show this. That might be something a little bit different than how you've ever shown it before. So why do we do voice of the customer? Well, at first, it's to understand and align with what the customers value. It's to keep our focus on providing value to the customer. And it's to gain greater understanding of the process. And this is kind of a key thing here. You might discover other customers of the process, especially when I'm doing cross-functional process improvement events. When I go ahead and use voice of the customer, invariably I find additional people that should have been included, additional stakeholders, that if I had not done a voice of the customer, we would have missed them and missed an opportunity to include them. And by doing a voice of the customer, it helps us to tell a story. And that's important for both management as well as the improvement team. And then it helps us to quantify qualitative data. And qualitative data are those things like, I feel this way. And it's kind of hard to, quantify your feelings. But I'll show you in a second a good way to be able to do that, to then create a baseline of data for potential KPI or key performance indicators going forward between current state and then the future state. So what I like to do is I like to show the voice of the customers in one slide, and I use a word cloud. And this is a word cloud that I created when I first started at the Port of Seattle, and one of the projects I was working on. The larger the word, the more times people mention that particular word or that particular phrase. And what's great about this is I don't have to explain anything. I can show this to the executive director, which I did, and they're like, yeah, I see that. And they narrow in on things. I remember one particular slide that I showed, and one of the executives went ahead and looked at it and said, wow, we're the anti-Walt Disney. We destroy people's dreams. He's like, that's not acceptable. We need to change that. And it was just one person that mentioned it. It was one little teeny line, but they narrowed in on it. So I love using word clouds because everybody's going to find those things that resonate with them. And what's powerful about this is you can use that as the current state. And then after you finish the improvement, you can do another voice of the customer, follow back up, and then capture those words. And you can compare side by side those two word clouds. It's easy to create these. You just do a quick search on Google for free word cloud creator, and there's a bunch of options that'll pop up. You feed in the words, and then you go ahead and get the result as an image that you can then go ahead and put on your slides. Really love this tool, and it's a great way to show your voice to the customer. So let's talk about plan. If nothing else that you get out of this entire speech today, planning really is key. And I'm going to show you that with this particular graph. So what we have here on the x-axis is time as we move along. And on the y-axis, we have two spectrums. One on the bottom is strategic planning, and on the top is your traditional planning. Traditional planning is really about, hey, we've got something to do, let's go do it. And as we start doing it, we realize that we make a lot of mistakes and we come back. With strategic planning, on the other hand, we spend more time planning and thinking about what could go wrong and making sure that we have contingencies and before we even start doing the action. And so what happens is we end up having a greater time savings by taking more time to plan, which is why I like to use the Pdca cycle, what you see on the right or the left-hand side here, because it demonstrates we need to consciously be thinking about putting more time into our planning than the rest of the cycle. So one of the big tools within Agile is that of sprints. And it's this concept of, yeah, it's a short race, but in Agile planning terms, it's a predefined period of time to deliver some tangible result so that you can receive customer feedback and adjust where needed to increase value. So let's look at traditional project delivery versus a sprint delivery. So in traditional delivery, work pretty much starts as soon as direction is given. And so it's kind of like a submarine going down, and they only resurface when they reach their end destination. And as a result, you get close to the target, but you might not necessarily hit it. And I think sometimes within our Pdca cycle, we do that as well. Hey, we need to improve this one thing. We go through the cycle one time. What happens with Agile is they have these sprints. And so it's you go down, you do the work, you come back up, you check with the product owner, is this what you're looking for? If it's not, you adjust, you move on. So you have multiple Pdca cycles in essence to get to that. And when you do, you find that you end up hitting the bullseye, not getting close to the target, but actually hitting the bullseye because you have these iterative cycles. So the Pdca cycle here is, or the sprint cycle rather, is very similar to the Pdca cycle. It starts off with planning, and then you start the implementation or the doing. You'll notice this backwards piece right here where it has the daily Scrum. So on a daily basis, you're reflecting back, what did we do, what worked, what didn't work, and then you have your sprint review. So at the end, you have some sort of product, some sort of service that you've made an improvement on. You show that to the customer, and you get their feedback. So you can take that and you can adjust. And then you have a retrospective, and I will talk about that a little bit later. So in essence, what happens is we have this fixed length, a firm start date, a firm end date. Usually it's 2 to 3 weeks for a sprint. Sometimes it could be as long as a month. It's not recommended you go any longer than that. And also it could be as short as a week, but that gets really tedious and tiring doing it on a weekly basis. And what you do is you do a sprint, then you do the next one, and so on and so forth. And that fixed time is known as a time box. And that's the next tool we're going to talk about. So a time box, well, you've probably seen this before. This happened to be the final game of my son's elementary school basketball career. It was fourth quarter. The score was tied, 3 seconds left on the clock, and we had a timeout, and the ball was in our possession. And so the coach gets with the team. They map out, this is what you need to do in the final 3 seconds in order to score the basket. And guess what? They did. They won the final game of the season. It was also the second game they won that season, but still, they finished strong. So that was awesome. And the advantage of the time box is that you can go ahead and it's based on Parkinson's law that says that as work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. It's a powerful time management technique, and it helps people to manage their time by creating these predefined periods of time for an activity. And that then forces you to set a time and then hold to that deadline. And this is what I really like. It encourages better prioritization. Now, for me and a lot of people, we have a tendency to be procrastinators or perfectionists. I'm a little bit of both. But it's a great tool for those people because it takes away that excuse of I can do it later or it's not good enough. And it's powerful because it sets a set time forces action. And so I would encourage you to use a time box as you go forward in your events, because whether you give yourself an hour or you give yourself 20 minutes, you're probably going to get the same amount of work done. Now, here's another tool that I really love in the planning phase, and that is user stories. So user story is a short and simple description of a feature, think of an improvement, told from the perspective of the person, the customer, who desires that product or service. So how do you do this? Well, there's 3 keys here. The first one is you want to clarify who wants the feature, describe what that feature will do, and the final one is understand how they will benefit from the feature. So what does that look like? Well, a user story then helps us to maintain our focus because we understand the purpose of what we're trying to do, and we can relate and empathize with customers. Now, again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, respect for people is at the foundation of what we do, both in Agile as well as Lean, and user story is no exception, because when we relate to people, when we empathize with what they're trying to achieve, it will influence our actions. And that then enables people to create fantastic customer value. So the formula is really simple to use a user story. And that is, as a, think of the role, I want some sort of a goal so that there's some sort of benefit. And off to the left here, you can see the card. This happens to be an IT one. And there's a thing down the bottom which is acceptance criteria. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's the definition of done. It's really how you know that you've completed this particular task. Now, there's a couple of characteristics to be able to know that you have a good story. The first is that it is independent. If you use this INVEST formula, and this was developed by Bill Wake, it needs to be independent. So it can't be contingent upon any other user story. It needs to be a self-contained story. It can be negotiable. In other words, you can constantly be iterating and working on improving it and changing it, and that's fine. It needs to add some sort of value to the end user, and you have to be able to estimate how long it's going to take to complete that task, which brings us to scalable. It cannot be so big that it's impossible to plan or create tasks or prioritize with any level of certainty. So it has to be kind of just the right size. And finally, it needs to be testable. And that's where the acceptance criteria comes in. We need to be able to know that we've actually completed it. So let me give you an example of how this can be really powerful. So my father had a stroke a number of years ago, and he doesn't move around too well. And he was coming over for a few days visit. Now, this is not my father on the couch, but pretty good picture because the house is clean. And at our house, it's not necessarily always clean. That's a process improvement thing that we need to definitely work on. But I was concerned that because my kids tend to leave things around on the floor, it might trip my father. And so I created a user story. Instead of going around saying, hey, you need to pick this up and you need to pick this up, that would have bugged both me and my kids. Instead, what I did is I created a user story. I said, as your grandfather, I want to enjoy my stay without worrying about tripping so that I can enjoy playing with my grandkids and be safe. So the acceptance criteria was that all of the tripping hazards were removed and that the guest bedroom and bath are cleaned. And that ended up really working miracles because the kids knew what they needed to do. They knew why they needed to do it, and they were happy to do it because they were part of the benefit. Here's the power of it. They realized that one of the carpets in our house was a potential tripping hazard for my father. I might not have even thought of that, but because I empowered them to know what they needed to do and to do it, that transparency allowed them to take that carpet, move it out into the garage, and that was pretty powerful. That's what can happen with user stories because you understand what people are looking for, and it might change the actions on what you're doing. So let's talk about do. Work in progress is a key, thing that we need to have in order to have successful implementations and projects. So out of curiosity, we're going to open up the chat for a second. Can you go ahead and put in there how many of you feel that you're really good at multitasking? Because multitasking is a good skill to have, right? Is there anybody that's good at multitasking? Yep, a couple. Some people no, some people yes. It's fantastic. All right, so here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little activity. And what we're going to do is we're going to find out if multitasking is something that is good or not. So I want you to get out a piece of paper, or you can go into the chat. And I think they're posting, I've got a worksheet. Now this worksheet, you're probably not going to have time to print it out and use it. So blank sheet of paper is fine. We're going to have 3 columns. First column is going to be numbers. The second column is going to be Roman numerals. And the third is going to be alphabet. So if you can get out a piece of paper, a pencil, and or pen, and also your stopwatch, because we're going to time this little activity here. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to multitask. What we're going to do is we're going to write the number 1, then the Roman numeral 1, which is I, and then the first letter of the alphabet, A. Then we're going to go back and write the number 2, the Roman numeral 2, and then the second letter in the alphabet, B. And we're going to do that all the way 1 through 10, I through X, and then A through J. So I'll give you just a second to go ahead and get that. And then we'll go ahead and start. So I'm going to do it along with you here. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and do that. And as you finish, go ahead and put the time that it took you to go ahead and complete this activity in the chat. All right. And for me, I'm going to go. Okay, what do we have? How long is that taking everybody to do? Okay, 31 seconds, that's pretty good. 35, 38, 43, fantastic. 1 minute, awesome. All right, we're gonna do the same activity, but this time we're not going to go ahead and try to multitask. We're gonna do one thing at a time. So we're gonna start with the numbers. We're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Then we're going to do the Roman numerals, I through X, and then the alphabet, A through J, the first couple of letters. So again, get ready with your stopwatch and go when you're ready. All right. So how long did that take you guys? Ooh, we're down in the 20s, 15 seconds. That's awesome. So I would be willing to bet that most of you were able to reduce your time from multitasking to doing one task at a time from 50% to maybe 30% of a reduction. And that's actually in tracking with what we see. And that's because of this idea of the lost time due to context switching. And Gerald Weinberg created this chart. And basically what he said is if you have one task that you're working on, you're able to devote 100% of your time to it. If you have two tasks, you can only devote about 40% to each one of those tasks, which adds up to 80%. And that leaves 20% of your time you're switching back and forth, trying to think, okay, where did I leave off? What do I need to do next? And then you begin your task. And then, okay, is this a good place to stop? Okay, yes, it is. Now I need to go back to the other thing and do that thing. Where was I? What do I need to do? And so what we see is with 3 tasks, you're spending about 20% of your time on each one of those 3 tasks, which is 60%, and 40% of your time is on context switching back and forth. So it's critical that we limit our work in progress or our WIP. So I'll give you an example of this. If we have 3 projects that are due, traditional management will say, hey, these are all important. We need to do them all at the same time. And so we start working on the first task for each one of the projects and then the next. But you notice we have this context switching that's going on. So we end up finishing sometime around late September, early October. But if we concentrate on one task at one project at a time, our context switching actually goes down and we actually end up finishing probably late July. What's powerful about this is our first project is finished in March, the second is in May, and the last one is in July, where we're not even finishing the first project if we're doing them all together and trying to multitask until August. It means we lost 6 months of not having any results. Plus, we probably could have fit in one more project in that same amount of time it took us to do 3. So traditional management says everything's important, do it all at once. And yet agile thinking and strategy says we need to prioritize and we need to focus. And we can actually create and have a much greater performance in working that way. So I'm going to show you a quick video here that shows this concept of flow with batching. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at this. Of course, there's an ad. Fantastic. But what we're going to see here when this is over, Geico is an important ad going along with the externals. Okay, or internals. There we go. As we go through this, we notice that we're starting to complete goods by doing one at a time. So our batch is 1, we finish it, we move it on to the next phase versus batches of 5 and 10. So in other words, you have to have all 10 done before you can move it forward. And so what we see is we're finishing the one at a time a lot faster than when we go ahead and do big batches. So I'm going to go ahead and take that down and close that out and come back to here. Okay. So the question is always, how many things? Well, a work in progress, it's more of a prerequisite to having performance than a cure-all. It really helps us to maintain our flow. It's like creating that Goldilocks zone, not too much, not too little. It's just right. So what I'm recommending is you establish the WIP, or the work in progress, that's right for you. So how many tasks you choose to focus on. Most people, because of context switching, tend to keep it to 2 to 3 items. And so the idea is to complete all of our tasks, and we usually divide it into 3 categories of to do, doing, and done, with doing being where we put that work in progress. So this is a great transition to our next tool, Kanban Boards. So a Kanban board is really a visual management system. It's a really powerful tool that we can use. And at simplest, it has these 3 sections of to do, doing, and done. And what you can do is you can quickly look. This is just a chart that I pulled off the internet, but we can see that Dorothy doesn't have any work in progress or anything completed. But as we look, we can see, oh, she has PTO. So that kind of explains why. And we can also see that Julie is almost finished, and so is Elizabeth. But both Claudia and Paula have a lot of work. And so as Julie and Elizabeth finish up their items, they may be able to then provide some capacity management and help them. So Kanban boards are a great visual tool, because the power of a visual system is that it makes things highly visible. We can prioritize those things that are critical and important. We can look and compare between the target and the actual performance, identify those gaps, and see if anything's abnormal versus normal. And it's a great opportunity to help us in our improvement efforts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a second here. We're going to open up the chat again if it's not already open. And I want you, you have 3 seconds to remember all of the checked items. It'll be bigger here in a second. So the checked items are those items that have been checked out. Okay, so I want you to remember as many as you can. You have 3 seconds to do that. On your mark, get set, go. All right, so in the chat, how many can you name? Let's see. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 0. Yep, absolutely. So that I rarely find anybody that had more than 3 unless they did a screenshot. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same exercise again. This time, we're going to go ahead and let's see. Here we go. We're going to do it again, but we're going to look at something. It's a shadow board, a silhouette board, where anything that's missing will be blacked out. So, and the shape is such that you can probably identify what it is. And I want you to go ahead and try to remember as many items as you can, this time in 3 seconds. Ready? Here we go. Okay. So let me ask you a question. How many items can you remember this time? And we got a 4, we got 10. Wow, 5. Fantastic. 7, great. So a lot more. Now, what I want you to do this time is, how many items can you remember that 73? Wow. How many items can you remember that weren't checked out? Can you remember some items that you saw that were still there? How many can you remember there? Not a single one, because I didn't ask you to focus on that. 0, 0, 2. Typically what happens is you can actually remember a few more of those items. Was there a gorilla? No, there was not. All right, fantastic. So let's go ahead and move on. So a Kanban board really should be simple. It's really about to do, doing, and done. You can add other things like, hey, we want to have a check, kind of a quality control check. That's fine. But really, I like just having it very simple: to do, doing, and done. We want to have our tasks. We put all the tasks that we have to do, and we put it up there. Now, don't try improving this anymore and thinking, hey, let's just get rid of the to-do section. We got to do them anyway, so aren't we doing them all right now? No, do not do this, because remember, work in progress. So we want to go ahead and in the doing section, create our WIP. And in this case, we're going to have 3 items, and we're not going to add any more into that. And so you start taking the items. Maybe it's the most important item. Maybe it is a quick win so that we can get the team motivated. Maybe it's something your boss says, hey, you need to make sure you get this done. Whatever it is, you put those in there, you work on it. And as you complete it, you move it over into the done section. You reprioritize what things need to be done. And then you choose the next task to add to your doing section. And guys, it's really that simple. Kanban boards are very simple, but they're very powerful. And here we have a great example of a physical idea generation board. And this is something that was developed by one of the people at the Port of Seattle, based off of some things that they had seen at another place. And Laura Roland, she went ahead and put this together. And we had these all over the port. People were using it in daily stand-up, and then COVID hit, and we couldn't be together. And so we ended up the first week canceling all of our process improvement events. But by the second week, we had decided to use Mural. And so we have this virtual space that we use these boards and run our events. So if you have any questions about how to do that, you can always reach out to me. To create a team board or a Kanban board, really follow the Pdca cycle. You want to brainstorm, what do you want to have in it? How are you, what are you going to communicate? What the cadence is, who's going to be responsible, and where are you going to put it, and what format you're going to use it. And then you set up the board, you use it, and you check and adjust. I have never seen a board that's been used that has stayed the same way from the first time that they created it. It always changes, it always morphs, and it is it's an awesome tool to use because it really builds team cooperation. So let's talk about check here. Definition of done. This is the acceptance criteria. It's the way that we know that our user stories are complete. And really, while the definition of done is created in the plan phase, it's also used in the do and check phase. And this tool is used to define the standard for the improvement deliverables. It creates transparency. It helps create clarity around the expected results. It helps to limit scope creep. And it also creates a lot of buy-in with the team and working with the customer to define that. So here's a great story. I always told my kids, hey, you need to do the dishes, and they would get frustrated with me. And the reason they'd get frustrated is because my definition of doing the dishes always changed. Sometimes it was just unload or load. Sometimes it was, clean the counters. Sometimes it was, hey, the counters need to be wiped down and the floor mopped. And they got frustrated with me. So one day I said, well, you know what? Why don't you guys create the definition of done? When I say doing the dishes, what does that mean? And so here's the power of that. They knew what needed to get done. And if they try saying, hey, I'm done with the dishes, I say, did you finish everything on your definition of done? And they're like, no, I still have to sweep the floor. I didn't have to argue with them. They knew what needed to get done, and they did it. Definition of done is a powerful tool. It got rid of so many arguments in our house around doing the dishes. Next, we're going to talk about burn down charts. This is a great tool. On the x-axis, you put all of the days that you have to get something done, your sprint, for example. On the y-axis, you have maybe the number of things that you're trying to do. It could be the time required for getting those things done, maybe some sort of point system. Whatever it happens to be, it creates a straight line from all the things that need to get done on day one to all the things that should be done on day two. So anything above that line is behind schedule. Anything below the line is ahead of schedule. And this is a great tool. And I used this when I was doing management consulting work on one of the projects because we had a tight deadline. We had to be done by the end of the year. We had 3 weeks to get it done. And this really helped the team stay focused and to make sure they knew where we were at all times to be able to get the delivery done. And it actually looks something very similar to this. And we were able to complete it on time. So there is also a burn up chart. It's a little bit different because you can add work or you can remove work. I really don't like that. I like to, when you're doing a sprint to have, your set amount of work, you can always add more things to it. But for the team to know what they need to do in order to be complete, that's for me, that's really important. I have right here an explanation of how to go ahead and do that. You can look at that on the slides later. So let's talk about our equity, diversity, inclusion lens. While not strictly a lean or agile thing, it really does go along with respect for people because equity, diversity, and inclusion really is about respect for people. What you see here is a doctor. This particular doctor is spending more time looking at his chart and taking notes than he is looking at his patient. And when he does look up, he's talking to the interpreter because the patient is a recent immigrant and doesn't speak English. And if he does speak, he's actually speaking quite loud because somehow that's going to help her understand English. It's not. Please don't do that. See, this patient was my mother-in-law 25 years ago when she first immigrated to the States. And my wife, as she was interpreting for her, was interpreting a clinical explanation of what she thought the issue was. And the doctor was surprised and said, well, how does she know this, this medical, terminology? And my wife said, well, it's because she's a doctor. Instantly, he put down the clipboard. He sat up, he turned and looked at my mother-in-law and started speaking directly to her. His entire perception had changed because his paradigm had shifted. And It's sad that it took that for him to think that this is a fellow colleague and not, some dumb immigrant. But really what we're trying to do within EDI is to shift people's paradigms. And perspectives really does play an important role in our solutions. So just because we develop a solution does not mean it's the right solution. And we need to go ahead and make sure that we are demonstrating value for the individual and that we're looking at including everybody and not having any unintended consequences. There's three keys here. We need to, what we think we see may not always be a complete picture. Remember, we're going back to grasp the situation. We want to look at everything. We always need to assume the best intention of people. And I love this as a rule. I put this in all of my workshops. The final thing is, how do we make sure that what we're seeing is a complete picture? Now I'm going to show you a slide here. If you're queasy, you might want to turn away, but there was a famine going on and a lion happened to be eating its young. But wait a second, let's apply these three keys here. What we're seeing may not be a complete picture. And we have to be humble enough to realize that maybe we're wrong in what we think we're seeing. We need to assume the best intention, and we need to figure out, how do we see the complete picture? Well, that's by going to the other side. And what we see then is that in this case, the lioness is actually kind and taking care of its young, moving it from one place to another. So at the Port of Seattle, we have been applying an EDI lens to all of our CPI work. That's pretty much since I've been here in 2019, if not even a little bit before that, because respect for people does mean everything. And we want to make sure that we're not unintentionally excluding anyone, both the stakeholders to develop the solutions, as well as to make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences with our solutions that would leave somebody out. And so there have been a lot of great suggestions that people have made throughout this conference. You can go back and look at those, but really it just takes a minute to make sure that our solutions are fair and equitable, that we have not left anybody out. So finally, we're moving on to the last couple of things here. The daily stand-up. This is a really simple tool. We hold our daily stand-up meetings because it helps us to improve our focus on the customer service. It's a great tool for rapidly communicating information and implementing change. It creates accountability within team members. It helps build trust, understanding, and strengthens the morale of our team. It's also a tool for improving performance. It's a visual tool for communicating team targets and results. It helps us as a planning and scheduling tool. And also it's a concise meeting that takes no more than 15 minutes. Now, speaking of concise meetings, I see that I have just a few minutes left, so we're going to go through this really quickly here. But a stand-up meeting really is three things. It is talking about what I did. So it's creating accountability. Yesterday, I accomplished these things, or maybe I didn't accomplish something. Today, I'm going to be doing this next thing. So you're stating your intention of what you plan on doing. And then finally, it's asking for help if you need it. Or it could even be saying, you know what, I'm going to have some bandwidth because I'm going to be finished with this one thing around 2 o'clock. I don't have to start my next thing until 4. So if anyone needs a little bit of help, I can help you between 2 and 4. Now that is powerful when the team starts trusting each other to go ahead and share what they're working on and let them know that they can help. All right, this is one of my favorite tools, word of the day. So word of the day can be used two ways. One is an educational tool where team members take turns coming up with a word, sharing the pronunciation of it and the definition, and then the team tries to weave that into their conversations throughout the day or throughout the week, depending on the cadence of using this. The other way is that everybody, every day, puts up a word of the day. This is, it creates respect and understanding among team members because they're putting up how they're showing up, how they're feeling that particular day. And so as a team, you can then relate to people, you can help them, you can, it's really a great tool if you use it right. So I'm going to show an example of both how to maybe use it right, as well as what not to do as a team. So here's a situation. We had a project that was due in 2 weeks, big deliverable. And I did a takt time analysis to realize it was going to take me about 80 hours a week for the next 2 weeks in order to deliver it. And so I was a little stressed. And I knew that both the team lead and the co-team lead, their work didn't start until after we delivered the deliverable. So I was hoping that I could get a little bit of help. So the first day I said, guys, I'm really busy. I could use some help. And I didn't get any response. So day 2, I said, guys, I'm really stressed about this deliverable coming up next week, at the end of next week. Could I get some help? I put in about 14 hours yesterday. I'm probably going to have to do that every day this week and work into the weekend. Can I get some help? Again, nothing. So on Wednesday, I figured, well, maybe if I show them just how busy I am, that might help. So I decided to put a German prefix on that. And I said, I'm uber overwhelmed, a lot of letters. Maybe they'll get the hint. They didn't. There was no offer of help. So on Thursday, I went ahead and went to the longest word that I knew. And that is that famous Welsh train station. They laughed at me. And still, no help. So really, I had to step up my game. And so I did a little internet search. And on Friday, I used that famous vacationing picnic spot in New Zealand in the Maori language. Tau matawhakatangi hanga ko ao ao tā mate ata ripuka kapiki maunga horunuko pukai whenua ki tana tau. I did it. So yeah, that finally got their attention because I ended up taking up the entire whiteboard, hyphenated it, and took up a second line on it, 85 letters in all. And they said, Jared, are you trying to tell us something? And it's like, yeah, other than working on your trend analysis, I do need a little bit of help. And I did get help the following week, and we were able to deliver that deliverable on time. But the point here is, that particular team, there was not a lot of respect for the individual. Everybody was kind of out for themselves and not worried about helping the rest of the team. And it was kind of a little bit of a toxic place. But word of the day can be a powerful tool. And a successful team board is one that is constantly used and that people really care about each other. And I have seen teams that were completely dysfunctional that started using team boards, and it built trust and respect, and they became a great place to work. And people actually then wanted to start working on their team versus leaving the team. So it can have a powerful impact on your work. Let's talk about the final tool, and that of retrospectives. So the retrospective, it's really about continuous improvement. It takes place at the end of your sprint, but before the next sprint starts. And you need to take time every time to improve. And this is a great way to do that. And so what happens is the team reflects on what went well, what didn't go so well, how they could do it better next time, and they collaborate on some improvement ideas. And then what will you do different next time? Something they decide by voting what they're going to work on. And so here's just an example I pulled off the internet, kind of explains how they put that together. So this is one that I really like. It is the Sailboat Retrospective. And it's really quite simple, actually, in putting this whole thing together. And what I like about it is it looks at a bunch of different facets. The first one, which can't see here, is what goals did we have? What were we trying to achieve? What was our destination? And did what we achieve align with those goals? The second thing is we look at our crew, people on the sailboat. Did we have the right team in place? Were we set up for success? How did we work together? Those sort of questions. And then what did we learn collectively? What were our big takeaways? What do we want to improve next time? What's that pot of gold that we're shooting for? And then also what accelerated us? What maybe helped us move forward that was different this time than last time? And conversely, what might have been a drag for us? What did we need to overcome? What slowed us down? And typically the drag is something that happens within the team, whereas this other one, the barrier, is something that was outside the team. So this might be, hey, we had another team that we were relying on getting information from them and we didn't get it, or the customer didn't come back to us, or whatever it happened to be. But what are those barriers that we encountered and we needed to overcome? And what's great about this is you go ahead and the team starts putting up their sticky notes. They come up with their ideas, they vote on those things, and they start to pick those things that they're going to do next time to improve. And this is a really powerful tool because it really does help align the team with what improvements they need to make next time. So each iteration, each sprint, they're doing better and better. So we talked about the Pdca cycle and all of these 12 tools and what they and how they go ahead and you can use them in each one of these phases of the Pdca cycle. I hope you go out and start researching some of these tools, find out a little bit more about how to use it, so that you don't do what my son did and run to third base, but you can actually use it in the right way, and it can be a powerful set of tools that can help you on your improvement journey. So I want you to remember that really all of this is about people. This was taken during COVID, and we had absolutely nobody in our international arrivals section. But this is why we come to work. This is what we do at the Port of Seattle, is we want to make sure that we are taking care of our guests, the people, the traveling public, and making sure that they get places safely and that they have a great experience while they're here. And this is why we do the improvement efforts that we do. So in conclusion, while the title was Agile and Lean, it's about getting results. I want you to take away that it's really about respect for people. And if we have respect for people, we end up getting the results. So probably a better title would have been, it's all about respect for people, which leads to results. So with that, are there any questions?
Hello. Thank you, Jared, for that. Let me just make sure. Okay, so there are a few questions here. Just a quick clarifying question that came in early. So I just want to make sure we address it really quick. You mentioned Scrum was not the same as Agile, but you described sprints as part of the planning phase. In other frameworks like Kanban, other Agile frameworks like Kanban don't adhere to sprints. So can you clarify any of that?
Yeah. So again, Agile is this idea of kind of the thinking, the values, the principles of respect for people in working with your customer and working with the people around you and delivering a good quality product and service. But that's an idea. How do you apply those principles? There's different frameworks. So there's the SAFe framework, there's the Scrum framework, and typically Scrum and Agile are used interchangeably. And when people think Scrum, they do think Kanban board and that sort of thing, because that's how they're applying those tools to use those principles of Agile.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that came in, do you have any strategies to engage and motivate teams when sprints, burn downs, and iterations are not getting close to target nearing the due date?
Yeah, and see, that's I think one of the biggest things that people freak out about is, oh, we're not going to deliver on time. We're going to make a mistake. We're in the red. You guys, we need to learn, especially as lean professionals, we need to learn to teach people that it's okay to be in the red, because what that tells us is that there's something wrong. Maybe we try to take on more than what we could actually do because we forgot about somebody was on vacation. I've made that mistake before. So now when I do a planning phase, I go ahead and make sure I have everybody's vacation schedule and incorporate that as we're building out the items to do. So don't be afraid to see red. Don't be afraid if you're not going to hit the target. That's okay. You can then analyze, well, why didn't we hit the target? What did we do wrong? What, did we take on too much, whatever? And that's an improvement opportunity. And so we want to try to get rid of that old traditional thinking of has to be done now, and get into this new thinking of how can we improve? What did we miss? How can we make sure we don't miss that again?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So probably time for one more question regarding gathering user stories and requirements. Can you recommend any systems or tools which help gather and organize user stories, transform them into requirements, and then pie in the sky, relate them to visual workflows?
Yeah, so there are more systems out there than I could possibly name. Again, a quick internet search is going to find some people use Trello. Some people within Microsoft Teams, there's an app or an add-on that you have, which is kind of creates like a Kanban board system. Monday is another one. There's a whole bunch of software applications out there that will help you to create those user stories, assign the prioritization of those, how long it's going to take, and then be able to create kind of a project management system that you can use virtually as a team.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Jared,
Okay.
thank you so much for your presentation and for being part of our conference this year. Everyone, there's so much more of the conference to come. This is our first session of week 2, so head out to our website where you can sign up for additional sessions, find session materials, and videos from last week. Thanks so much. Don't forget to take the survey that will pop up at the end of our session today. Again, will provide us and Jared some great feedback about the presentation today. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.